We have an exciting partnership to announce before we get into today's Scuttlebutt. Scuttlebutt has been asked to join Reads Across America Radio, a 24/7 internet radio station where you can listen to veteran stories 24/7. You can find that on the iHeartRadio app. You can also find it on their website, readsacrossamerica.org. The Scuttlebutt will be featured Friday nights at 9 p.m. and Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. If you don't know anything about Reads Across America, they're an incredible organization, all dedicated to honoring veterans and those who gave all in service to our country. Check out the Scuttlebutt on their radio station and all the other programs that they have on their 24/7 radio station, again, on iHeartRadio app or readsaccrossamerica.org. Joining me today on the Scuttlebutt is Ahmad Burse. Ahmad, it's awesome to have you a part of this. You reached out to us, said, hey, I'd love to jump on your podcast. It's exciting to have you here. Please introduce yourself. Thank you, and welcome to the program.
Well, my name is Ahmad Burse. I'm the owner of Burse Creative Consulting, and what I do is I'm a career coach for civil engineers. I spent 23 years in the military as an infantryman. Some of my background was as a United States Army drill sergeant. I was a member of the 3rd United States Infantry, the Old Guard Ceremonial Detachment. I also was in Desert Storm, a member of the coalition that supported, that tried to assist during Bosnia, as well as this recent stint in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so after retiring from the military, I taught for a little stint, and then I found my passion as a coach for civil engineers.
Awesome. And you had 23 years in the Army starting in 1989, is that correct?
Yes.
Why did you decide to enlist?
To be quite honest with you, well, my family, my mother was in the military, my father was in the military. For me, it was one of those, hey, listen, you serve your country. Doesn't matter how you serve, as long as you're contributing. So then me being exposed to the Army at an early age just made me say, okay, all right, this is something that I wanted to do. So at 16 and a half, this is really interesting. And I had a conversation with my mom about it. When I was in 11th grade, about to go to 12th grade, they had a delayed entry program. I enlisted into the Army. So then after I graduated at 17, 2 months later, I was in basic training. So, and I wanted to see the world. I didn't have the financial resources to see the world, but at the time, the Army slogan was "Be all you can be." And I wore that out. I did everything I could while I was in the military. So I hope that kind of gives you a background on me.
Oh, that's awesome. So it's most people that come on the program usually come from a military family, and most of the time it's their father, their uncle, their grandfather. But having your mother serve, boy, did she have any advice for you going into the military? What was her experience like?
This is interesting. So then when my mother joined the military, and I want to say it was in the 60s, late 60s, they had the military was segregated in regards to men and women. So then they had a program for women called the Women's Army Corps. The Navy had similar programs along with the Air Force. So when she joined, there weren't any women, or it was the Women's Army Corps. So it was all basic training for women, and everything was separate. And then whenever she got to a permanent party, then they began to integrate the services somewhat. But at that time, the only opportunities available for women were things such as medical, or in the food service, and those were the careers choices, and they were kind of limited. In regards to any kind of advice my mom gave me, it was just to take advantage of what was available. Sometimes people can be in a situation and they'll just view it so negatively, and they won't realize the value of what they actually have. So I think that's kind of stuck with me, and it kind of allowed me to deal with things, to process things, and to be successful in situations that may not have been as success for others.
And why did she decide to enlist? That was rough, Vietnam era.
Yes. Well, at the time, African-American woman, she lived in Pittsburgh. She had ideas of wanting to see something different herself. and that was the reason why she enlisted. She wanted to see the world. She wanted to see what was out there outside of her, her confines. And my mother was from a single parent, well, not a single parent home. My grandfather and my grandmother had got divorced. I want to say like around the time my mother was either in middle school or something like that, and that impacted the family's resources. So then, she had seen poverty up close, and that's not what she wanted for herself.
Was the military what you expected? Did your parents kind of prep you for that? Like you got into, basic and was like, oh, this is easy.
I I would say everyone has different expectations. The military is what you expect of it for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and that's my opinion. It's so then during that time, and this is a conversation I had with my mother. Her birthday was on Memorial Day, so then we had spent time. And before I went to the military, I watched Platoon, Full Metal Jacket. There's a couple other military movies that I watched to kind of mentally prepare myself to go into the military.
Yeah.
And it was everything I think it was everything that I needed, and what I wanted I made out of. So if it wasn't something that I wanted, then I made something out of it. But for me it was a wonderful experience. You have some people that come, oh man, it's this, and I didn't get to do that, and I wasted. I remember it was like yesterday. It's my first duty assignment. I was in Washington State at Fort Lewis, and there was someone who was PCS in there, leaving the military, and the guy's like, "Man, I wasted 4 years of my life. I can't believe." It's like, wow, really? It's like you've been here 4 years, and that's about all you can say.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm an easygoing person. They feed you, they pay you, they give you a place to stay. I mean, hey, what more could you ask for?
Yeah, and they train you. They
and they,
they're
and, and,
training.
and they train you, so that was my thought process in it.
Now you joined 89. Was that sort of a peace year? This was right before Desert Storm, Desert Shield. Was there anything going on when you first got in?
89 was a sort of a peace year, but I believe 3 or 4 years before that was Grenada,
Uh-huh.
and there was a lot of Grenada raiders still around. It's a different army. A lot of those folks, not a lot of them, but a lot of them had experiences from Vietnam. So then shortly after, it was Panama. Like I want to say 2 or 3 years after that, that's when Panama kicked off. And there's I ran into a lot of people that's like, hey, yeah, I was in Panama. It's like, well, what happened? It's like, well, the 82nd jumped in, Rangers jumped in and did this, that, and the other. So yeah, but 89 was it was a peace year, you could say.
Whenever Desert Storm, Desert Shield kicked off, what was your role in it?
I I was a infantryman. So then it's just like funny how life works. So then I was at Fort Lewis. I was at third Battalion, 47th Infantry Regiment, 347 Infantry. I was in Alpha Company. So then when Desert Storm kicked off, not all brigades and divisions, left. 82nd, 25th. There's a lot of different major organizations that went to Desert Storm. However, they needed people to fill spots. Like they needed folks to be like door gunners. They needed folks to, just for a lot of different things. So then out of our company, 2 platoons left. And I was one of the 2 platoons, I was in one of the 2 platoons. We went over there and we pulled support, and we pulled support and escort for, I think it was 252 ADA. So your air defense artillery, the guys, or not guys, but the folks that are shooting stuff out of the sky, they needed support. So they were moving. They're knocking out scuds and they're going up and down through Iraq. So they didn't have any support, infantry support, to do security, just all those sorts of things. So that was my role when I was in Desert Storm.
What did you? I guess this was your first experience with war, with conflict. Was that what you expected it to be? Military, you came from the military family, you got in there, probably not too much of a culture shock. I'm sure touching ground in Kuwait might have been a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, no, and don't forget, so then the Kuwait is not the Kuwait that it is now. So then this is the first, because in I can't remember the full details, but the deal was, Iraq goes into, is it Kuwait or Saudi Arabia? I can't remember.
Wait,
And
I think.
they say, we want your oil.
Right.
And so then it's like, okay, all right. So then Kuwait asked for help. And then, of course, the ultimate defenders of the world come and they arrive. So they were just not experimenting, but they're building things. They're figuring out, how's this warfare going to work? So then it wasn't what I expected. I don't know what to expect. I think I was scared. I remember I cried with my mom on the phone. I was like, Mom, I'm going to, I'm going overseas. And then she was like, okay. And, and I think to her, I told her, I was like, I don't want someone to take my spot, because at the time, if you were only child, this is crazy, right? If you were only child, or if you didn't have any brothers or sisters, you could put in a request to stay back.
Yeah.
And they would.
Right.
And it's just kind of, now, does that happen now? I don't know if it still happens now, but in any instance, that's what they had said. And I was like, I told my mom, I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's what I signed up for, so I'm going to go. And it was interesting. I mean, once you got on ground, you're a little bit more comfortable. There's stuff, you hear the scud alarms and all sorts of craziness going on. So
and it lasted, as we know, lasted what, like 8 days. It was very quick.
Of the initial war, but then there's cleanup and all sorts of other stuff. So
yeah. And how long after that was Bosnia?
Let me see. That was 92, and then Bosnia was in 96. And then Bosnia, yeah. Bosnia, it's funny how we did things, because prior to, like, when I went to Desert Storm and then I went to Bosnia, what they did was, you got boots on the ground and they ran you through like lanes to prep you for what you're going to do. So like, you got boots on the ground, so we figured out how you dig in case of this, QRF, quick or drills, whatever. All those things we did in country. That's in Desert Storm, and then in Bosnia we did in country. When we went to Iraq and Afghanistan, we weren't doing all those things prior to. Like, it was like you went to, JRTC, the Joint Readiness Training Center in Louisville, in Louisiana, or you went to NTC, the National Training Center, and whatever your mission was, you were preparing there in those sites. So basically, whenever you got on the ground, they did relief in place. You actually, whenever you were changing out, you come in, you shake hands with and do a left seat, right seat ride with whoever, and then they take off, and you just kind of cover down on what they're doing. Yeah. As opposed to in the past, you get in the country and then they start showing you how to do A, B, C, and D. So.
How was Bosnia different for you than Desert Storm?
Bosnia was different for me. Bosnia was different because Desert Storm, of course, was a desert. Bosnia was a European. I would say I seen more death in Bosnia than I did in Desert Storm. And the only reason, the Serbs and the Croats, them folks, they were very, I mean, like, it was fields of people that had been killed, and then they chopped them up and put them in the ground. It was just the amount, just the ruthlessness, and understanding like why there needed to be an intervention there, because these folks, and then when you look at it, a lot of it is from World War II or World War I, a lot of these things, and these folks never forgot, and they very much were waiting for something to happen, a tipping point, so that they could just exact revenge. So that's what I'll say in Bosnia, and I think it was more of because we were there longer, we were just doing a lot more, engaging with the population, just doing a whole lot. We were doing more patrols there. We did joint patrols with the Russians. I mean, we were just doing a lot of different things. And that was one of the things, there's a lot of people have a lot of stories to tell about the military, and they'll tell you stories that never made the headlines. It's like, we were one of the first organizations At the time, I was with Echo 51st Lurs. We were one of the first organizations to do joint patrols with the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
And, the Russians, where America is like, hey, how you doing? The Russians were like, we don't care. We're like, I remember we were in a convoy and they had a BTR-60. It's like a Russian transport vehicle, and it was ahead. And we were going down the road, and the BTR-60 was just forcing people off the road. They didn't care. They're like, hey, get out of the way. And whereas Americans, we pull over and stop. Nah. So it was a culture shock. It was an opportunity to meet different people. It was definitely that's my biggest. And then plus I was a leader during that time when I went to Desert Storm. I was a specialist. No, did I make as a no? I was an E3. Then I made specialist, but I was a saw gunner, a squad office. And then whenever I got to Bosnia as a team leader, so it was a different role, and whenever you're in charge of folks as opposed to just doing things.
Would you say that you embraced that role or did you sort of have to develop into that leadership role?
You have to develop into a leadership. I mean, because a lot of times you're just expected to know, but and that's one of the reasons why I became a career coach for civil engineers. Number one, civil engineers, these folks are building things with their hands. They're the ones, when you look at roads and you look at buildings, they're not to say that all engineers don't have a role, but these folks are where the rubber meets the road. And, you may be technically savvy, but you may not have those skills to kind of motivate people to move to the next step. And so I had to develop those skills as a leader. In Bosnia, I had some tough lessons learned. I made a bunch of mistakes. By the grace of God, no one got killed, no one got injured, but it's just the things that I was dealing with. It just, I had leaders that kind of like, hey, listen, you need to figure this out here. So
Can you define for me sort of one of the lessons that you had to learn, one of the mistakes you made while you were there?
I would say one of the lessons I got from Bosnia was your duty. If you're supposed to do something, go ahead and do it. In the incident that occurred was I was supposed to check a vehicle. No, the vehicle got checked, but I was supposed to come back and like there was a lines like the vehicle goes to get inspected, does this, then after that, the next person, and then as the leader, I'm inspecting to make sure everything was done. Well, when it came from the shop, I was under the impression everything was good to go. And everything was good to go mechanically, but it's the operator's responsibility to make sure that fluids are topped off and this, that, and the other. So we're on a patrol and we have to pull over because the check engine light's coming on because there wasn't enough oil in the vehicle because I failed to check. It was my fault. So then, it was surreal because it's like, man, you have to take your job seriously. And if it's your duty to do something, you got to have enough integrity to go ahead and do it and don't, blow it off. Because at the time I was like, oh yeah, we're good. Because when you do things so often, you kind of get complacent. And at that point I was complacent, and that's dangerous because you can you can cause someone their life by your complacency, by you not doing what you're supposed to. So a lot of things occurred. I mean, did I get in trouble? No. However, it was like I was looked at differently in the organization. Like a dirtbag. Like, hey, he was supposed to do that and he didn't do it. Like, oh man, that dude. And it's like, what I say, it's eye opening. It's eye opening and it's sobering. So those are some of the lessons learned. But you got to learn those lessons. And if I didn't learn those lessons, I wouldn't be here right now. I would say that bad experience that I created benefited me because I'm the one who makes sure that all the dots are, all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed because of that experience. Now, do I got to share that with everyone? No. But people who know me and who have worked with me know he's not the one. If it's something wrong, I'm going to find it. And not because I want to find it, because it's the right thing to do. So then that's how I look at things like that.
So you spent some time in Bosnia working with the Army Corps of Engineers?
No.
Okay.
Oh, well, hold on.
Because I want to clarify that because this comes into play later in our conversation.
Well, no, because Bosnia had the No, because Bosnia, where the engineers, the Army Corps was probably there, but remember during Bosnia, that's when you had it wasn't before it was KBR, it was Halliburton, and all of
Mm.
the cooking, um, basic
HVAC.
infrastructure,
Yes.
yeah, HVAC, basic infrastructure stuff was handled by that contractor. So the Army, who had actual engineers, they weren't doing it, and the Army Corps of Engineers, they weren't really active in that wasn't their role at that time.
Okay.
So no, I didn't start actually working with the Corps of Engineers until after I retired, and then I went into the civilian side.
All right. So we'll get to that. We have some stuff to cover before then.
Mm.
So between Bosnia and the war on terror, Afghanistan, Iraq, um, that's a significant amount of time, 5, 6 years.
Yeah.
But during that time, 9/11 happens. And where were you at, I guess, at 9/11? But mainly the deeper question is how did the Army change for you right
Huh.
after that?
Man, thank you for that question. You know, people, it's funny. And, and when I talk to people that are around my age or younger, you can ask them what exactly happened during 9/11. Where were you at? And people, it's like something that brings folks together because you can talk about specifically where you were at, what you were doing when you seen the second plane hit the tower, because the first one hit it and everybody's like, oh, what's going on? And then that next one flies around. I was like, oh. So then I was a United States Army drill sergeant. I was training privates. And my boss, the first one calls me and says, hey, Burse, check this out. And I'm like, what? And it's like, we seen everything change. It was like, wow. So then after the towers went down, and then, excuse the French, all hell broke loose across the military, because I was at Fort Benning, and at that time, Benning, you had open posts. So anyone could come on the post. Immediately shut down. Immediately, they put security in. As a matter of fact, in the reaction, we had privates that were on the gate. So if you can imagine, soldiers that have never really been fired a weapon, they're pulling gate guard because we had to have some kind of reaction force. And so it was just, and then, hey, you have to have your ID card on the time. So that's what happened. And I watched, you know, we were motivating the soldiers differently. It's like hoo ha, we're going to kill bin Laden. Hoo ha, we're going to kill, and those were some of the cadence that we were coming up, because it's like, hey, bin Laden's, it's like, and so the whole war on terrorism, it just changed or focused as, and me and a couple of my drill sergeant buddies, we trained our soldiers. Let me preface it by saying this. At the time, not everyone had been to combat, let alone 2 or 3 times. So a lot of drill sergeants, a lot of folks didn't have those eyes. They didn't have that foresight. So whenever we were training soldiers, we made sure we told them, it's like, listen, it's like, don't think you're not going to go to war. Anything can happen. And you can be in war. And they're like, oh, no. And I remember there's 2 units I was a member of. One of them was 347 infantry. No, one of them was the 3rd United States Infantry. And I forgot the other unit I was in. But I told them, I'm like, listen, y'all gonna go to war one day. Oh no, they'll never send us. Sure enough, they needed bodies. They needed bodies over in Afghanistan and Iraq because they were burning out the regular troops. It's like, oh yeah. So I always trained my folks to be ready. And I made sure I put that into them to be prepared. So then it just kind of gave validation to what I was saying in regards to ensuring that we're preparing soldiers to be able to go overseas and do what they got to do and come back alive. So that just kind of, 9/11 kicking off, it just kind of ramped things up. But I would not have trained the soldiers any differently, because I knew, hey, listen, I'm coming from I'm a combat vet at this point. So I'm seeing, yes.
So the lesson that you learned in Bosnia, it seemed to have not followed you too far in a sense, because you went into drill instructor. And why did you decide to do that? Did that incident with the oil, did that follow you at all?
No, the incident, and it's just funny. It's funny how things are. It's just real funny how life is. So then the oil incident, but once the Army is very small, and especially when you get into your military occupational specialties, your MOSs, like you'll run into people like privates I went to basic training with 7-8 years. I'm running into them, and you run into people, and to some degree your reputation can follow you. But I was a good dude. People knew that I was straight. So as opposed to someone that's constantly making mistakes, like, hey, that person's a dirtbag. Um, if you make a mistake, it's like, dude, he messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And any leader that's a leader knows people just make mistakes. Sometimes they drop the ball, and you have to be able to give that And I think that's one of the things that made me a better leader, because I gave folks the opportunity to fail. And it's like, listen, you're going to tell me how you're not going to do this again. It's not you're sorry, you shouldn't have done this. That wasn't my conversation. My conversation was, you're going to tell me how you're not going to do this again. You're going to prevent it from it happening to someone else. That's my conversation, because what's done is done. I'm not going to worry about it. But as long as it's not life limb, then you're going to learn from it. But I want you to learn from it. I want you to grow from this. I don't want you to use this as a benchmark of, this is where my career ended. You understand what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. Totally.
So
so why go to be a drill instructor? That's
okay. I apologize. So I was at in all honesty, you know when it's time for you to do something, you have to separate yourself from other people. And the major ways to separate yourself is you can either become a drill sergeant or become a recruiter. When I was at Fort Belvoir or Fort Myers, when I was with the 3rd United States Infantry, my neighbor at the time was a recruiter, and he looked like hell, like regularly. So I said, nah. And one of the things that had stuck in my mind, like, people can't remember, like, at least soldiers, I'm not sure about even, I think, the Marines, but soldiers especially, they may not be able to remember, who their first sergeant was, their first sergeant, who their first squad leader is, but they remember their drill sergeants.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of impact I wanted to have with people. Like, I wanted them not as a negative, but as someone to say, hey, listen, that was a standard bearer. If that dude said something, if he gave me information, he wouldn't. He's trustworthy. He's a person of honor, of integrity. That's what I wanted. So.
It's interesting you say that. I've had a recent guest come on to a VBC event through our Veterans History Project. We interviewed him for our magazine, and he said that he was kind of a troublemaker in high school, didn't quite have a goal or a direction. 9/11 happens. He says, I want to serve. He joins the Marine Corps. And as soon as he met his, well, they're not called drill instructors in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, they're Marines are drill instructors, Armies are drill sergeants.
Okay, so drill, yeah, in the Marine Corps, he said, meets his drill instructor, and he says, that's who I want to be. That's the guy. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, exactly speaking to what you're saying, is like, those kids come in, and the guys that are looking for that sort of mentorship, they can look at you and say, this guy has it together. Well, this guy has drive.
I look at things in a larger scope. And when I left the military, I was able to connect the dots. My point being is, what I seen as a drill sergeant was a lot of soldiers whom were being raised by their grandparents, a lot of soldiers whom did not have strong male figures, strong adult figures. Hey, private, where's your mom at? Or, hey, private, where's your dad at? He's dead. Where's your mom at? She's in jail. These are the folks that were coming in, and there's nothing wrong, but you have to be able to look at society. You have to see, well, where are these folks coming from? How can you assist them? Not all privates need the same thing, but that structure, in that, hey, listen, I'm not here to run no game on you. I want you to be successful, not just in the military, but in life.
Yeah.
So you need to get to shutting up and doing what I'm telling you to do. And that's kind of that was the way I presented myself. They knew it, the other leaders knew it, and people got along. Excuse me.
how do you learn to, I mean, you say you went through to become a leader. Like what would you say is like the biggest thing that helps you to get to that point where you can say like, I'm gonna shape these soldiers. I'm gonna take this responsibility and bear that cross.
I don't think for me there was a there's a saying on the trail. Well, for drill sergeants in the Army, it's called the trail. When you're on, I have no idea why it's called the trail, but you tell them you're on the trail, everybody knows like, oh, he's a drill sergeant. But the point being is either you wear the hat or the hat wears you. So then folks that wear the hat, it's a hat. All it is, it's a hat. It's nothing. If I take the hat off, I'm still going to be that same leader. I'm still going to be that same example setter. I'm still going to be that person that's going to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
Still going to be that person of integrity. Whereas you got folks where the hat wore them and it went straight to their head. They're doing things that you look at them like, dude, what are you doing that for? We're here to train these. They, just questionable integrity type things.
Mm-hmm.
Decision making is like you've never led soldiers before. So
yeah.
for me, I've led, like I said, I've led folks outside of being a drill sergeant. I've developed soldiers outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
I've coached outside of that, and that's the experience. And it made me very comfortable with if I'm telling a soldier, like one of the things I would do is like, listen, whenever you report to your duty station, you make sure you're at this time. Shine your shoe, shine your boots. Make sure you have a pair of starch BDUs because, you can't change a first impression. So then you want to make sure that you give the best impression. And that's something that I would tell anyone. So it's like little things that I've learned that, hey, as a leader, if I see a soldier that comes into the organization and they look they used to call them rag bag. You look like a rag bag, well, you can have the best PT score in the world, be the most intelligent, but you're presenting yourself as someone who that doesn't personify.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're going to get the business when you first get there. Oh, you're going to get and you're probably going to have some difficult times. And it's really hard to change people's perspective of you if that's the first time that they've met. So then you take that philosophy and you move it into the civilian world. If I'm meeting you for the first time, we're kind of informally here, but I'm going to have a tie on. I won't be cleanly shaven because I like my beard, but I'll be manicured. I'll look like, okay, this person, you can tell that, they're coming with professionalism, and I understand that they're going to be serious about whatever it is that I do with them. So then, so I think to answer the question is like, I was prepared, not really prepared, but I'd already led folks. So I was comfortable and I knew what could and worked. I knew some of the things that worked and some of the things that didn't work. So I came with tools.
Is there a particular soldier that, we don't have to say their name, but someone that stands out to you in your memory of like, you really connected with this kid and like, you really felt like there was you helped them find purpose in their life?
Oh yeah. Okay. So, you're not supposed to put your hands on soldiers. That's the bottom line. When I was there, you're not supposed to put your hands on soldiers. It's just, but
it's a great way to start a story.
So and then this soldier, he we're in basic training, comes to me, it's like his first week. And he says, hey, drill sergeant. Well, he didn't say, hey, drill sergeant. He's like, excuse me, drill sergeant, can I talk to you? And so, I'm very nonchalant and very flippant. It's like, hey, private, what the explicative do you want? And he's like, drill sergeant, I can't make it here. I was like, what the hell? And he's like, I just can't do this. I'm like, all right, you private. Listen, I don't have the time to do the paperwork to get you up out of my army. So you come back next week. All right, you understand that, you private? So goes through, next week comes. I can't do this, Joe Son. I was like, listen, and I called him more explicatives. And, me and him do this song and dance. Our basic training AIT was combined, so it was 13 weeks. So me and him do this song and dance for about a good 9 or 10 weeks. And then I finally tell him, and it's like, we're in a hall. not in the hall. We're in a big area, and he comes up to me. He's like, "Joe Sergeant, this is I'm quitting. I'm quitting." So then I grab him. I'm like, "Listen here, you private," and I explained to him like, "Listen, you've done this, you've done that. You know, your scores are fine. You're just as good or better than anybody else here. So why do you want to quit?" And then it kind of clicked into him. He's like, so then, when you were able to build someone like that, who doesn't have that self-esteem, that impacts you. Because it's like, hey, I was able to, I wanted him to be successful.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to let you quit. If you can shoot, you're physically fit, you can problem solve. Whenever you're a team leader, you're leading, you're telling people how to do, you're getting things done. And a lot of times I think we as human beings are doing a lot of positive things. However, unless there's someone to tell you how far you came, because it's like, listen, private, you couldn't even do 10 push-ups. Now you're doing 52. What do you want from me, guy? So then, and I grabbed him. It's like, listen, private, you're going to graduate, right? And then he looked at me and he laughed and he had this big old smile on his face because he knew I was not being tyrannical, but it was from a actual point of respect because I knew that he could do this. Yeah. He didn't know it, but at that point, so anyway, my sergeant major, the sergeant major who's in charge of the battalion is watching me grab this private up. So after I let the private go, our sergeant major he's an African American, like 6'2", wasn't one for words. He has this big old finger. And then he calls me in his office, and then I explained to him like what had happened, and he understood, that sometimes people need different types of reinforcement. And I wasn't one for yelling and screaming. I was a person of action, but that stuck with me because you don't know who needs that little nudge to get through. And if I would have let him quit, he would have quit, but he wasn't. There are folks that I wanted to quit that were just terrible human beings, and they were hanging on. I'm like, why don't you quit? Why don't you give up?
I'll be happy to do that paperwork.
Yeah, I'd be happy
to start it.
Yeah, but with this kid, he just didn't have the self-esteem. And I was like, listen, dude, at the end, it's like, listen, I'm tired of talking to you, man. Yeah. You got this. What are you worried about? So then, but that's to answer your question. That's what stuck with me, that guy.
Before we get into sort of your post-service career and your transition into the civilian world, I want to touch on the fact that you come from a line of strong, proud African Americans who served in the military. And does that legacy, does that mean something to you? It's we know that less than 0.5% of the American population serves in the military. Obviously, much less than that, people of color serve in the military. Did that give you a sense of pride?
I would say people in the military and people outside of service looked at me like a Black soldier. But I consider myself a soldier that just happens to be Black. You understand what I'm saying? Like, people see color a lot, but don't get me wrong, I've experienced racism. I've experienced all sorts of craziness. However, I served my country. Is that a negative? Whenever they say, hey, we need someone to leave their family, miss out on a whole bunch of holidays and do this, I did it. There's nothing, there's not a negative you can say in that. So, is there a legacy? At this point, I can't really worry about what other people's opinions are. I have to worry about what I've done, what I can live with, what I can sleep. Can I sleep at night? You understand what I'm saying? So I hope that I answer that question.
Well, I'm thinking more along the lines of like we had on for one of our VBC events, the first Air Force officer commissioned by Eisenhower.
Oh, wow.
She was commissioned by him. She was the first Black female to be commissioned into the Air Force, and a trailblazer. Talking with her about what did it mean to you to be a part of that legacy of service. And obviously there's a pride in serving. but she's in a very unique position, being the first Black woman who was commissioned as an officer in the Air Force. And it makes me think, having your mother serve, your father serve, continuing on with that sort of legacy in your family of service, and a pride that comes along with that.
Of course, I'm proud of my service.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and this is why I have to keep it for me, what I've done, because at one point in America, to say you served in the military was like, oh man, you've done so many great things, and at this point, people don't understand those sacrifices.
Yeah.
And so it's not that I'm not proud of what I do. I just try to make sure that that's not the thing that defines me the most.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
because I've met a lot of people who left the military, and it's like that was their most, that was the best times of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, oh my goodness, I love deploying. Not all deployments are bad, just doing stuff, or any deployment where no one, well, you can't even say that anymore, but in any instance, uh I didn't want the military to be the thing to define me
Mm-hmm.
as a person. I didn't want my service to be the only thing I can look back on and say this was great, and I feel that happens to a lot of people. I just look at things. If you're great, if you're a good communicator, you're going to be able to communicate on the playground. You're going to be able to communicate in front of Congress. If you're a good human being, you're going to be a good human being in the military, outside. So then I love the fact that I was able to serve. I love what the military has done for me, but I didn't want it to be the defining part of my life, because I see some folks.
Go ahead.
They're not able to shift. They're
Mm-hmm.
not able. It's like, when I was a drill sergeant, I used to do this and do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if you ask me about it, I'll tell you. But it's like not the first thing out of my mouth is I did this and I did that. That's just how I am.
Which we had talked about previously before the recording, talking about communication. That was something that sort of helped you developed, because you said at the beginning of your service you weren't necessarily the best communicator, but coming out of service, it's something that you had really created a skill set for, and that helped you in this transition time back to the civilian world.
Yes.
And so what did you decide to do after you got out of, you were in 23 years. So to transition back to the civilian world probably was its own culture shock.
Yes, it was. Absolutely. So then I think it was about the time, and I'm being transparent. So then at 20 years, or I think was it at 20 years, 18 or 19 years, somewhere. So then the average, I was at Sergeant First Class. So you make E8 between 12 and 18 years, somewhere in between there. If you've checked all the blocks that they say, hey, listen, you need to do this, you need to do that. So then I looked at it and it's like, well, hey, I haven't gotten promoted yet. And I'm looking at what's getting promoted, the skill sets that the military was really focusing on to be that next level of leadership. I missed, or maybe I didn't have, because if I had them, I would have gotten promoted. So then my point being, at that point, it's like, okay, all right, I need to prepare myself to leave. So then I said, all right, I started taking college classes. I figured out what I wanted to do when I left the military. I wanted to I wanted to be a motivational speaker when I left the military. So then I started taking classes on organizational leadership. That's when I got my master's in. I went to Toastmasters. I became a distinguished Toastmasters. I started integrating myself in the places that would allow me to, learn those skills, so that I'd be more effective, so that I'd be more marketable, so that I could bring more value to wherever I went to. So that's how I prepared myself for transition. As I said before, excuse me, there's a lot of, I've met a lot of friends that have transitioned, and, it's like, oh, well, they're going to hire me because, hey, I'm a hero and I've done this. Folks aren't really looking at heroes anymore, not like they once were. They're not really, and to be, and furthermore, what I found is I'm on this side, they have concerns about hiring veterans. It's like, what do you mean? Oh, they got those problems from being deployed. It's like, what do you mean by that? What are you saying? Well, we don't want them going off. It's like, so then this is kind of the narrative that people are talking about on the outside. And it wasn't until I left the military, and like I said, I'm not one to boast about my experiences. So people will talk freely with me. Like, oh yeah, that's like, really, that's what you think? That's how you feel about the soldiers? Oh, okay. So I prepared myself, and it was a transition. I think that the most difficult transition for me is, like, a lot of times senior leaders, you turn in your cell phone, and turning in your cell phone means that you're separating yourself from the military. It's like no one's going to call because they need you to do A, B, C, and D, and it's a blessing. Like, hey, but no one's calling anymore. So for a lot of us, our value was tied to our position, to our rank, to the things we were doing within the military. That's where some people's value was, and it was mine, because hey, it's a significant shift that, on Monday they're calling me to find out about A, B, C, and D, and on Tuesday no one even checks on you. It's like, wow, this is, because when you leave, you leave. That's it. Everyone knows that you're not going to be there for your entire life. So those are some of the things that I did to transition. I realized I was leaving, and I had to have some skills, because you can't, in the branch of service I was in, cursing was like, okay, cool, whatever. I mean, 4-letter word every other letter is like, all right, cool. No one cares. But you can't come into an interview explicative this, explicative that, and by the way, explicative that, mother blank blank blank. So you have to learn a different skill set. So yeah.
Not as many soldiers or servicemen and women probably were as proactive then as you were. Certainly, to create that skill set, to have that understanding and that drive to say, I'm going to set myself up for this next chapter.
Well, there's a reason behind that. So then the Warrior Transition Battalion. So then and that's one of the Warrior Transition Battalion is a place, they needed leaders. My my leadership sent me over there, and I was a platoon sergeant there. And the purpose of the transition battalion was for injured and wounded soldiers who are coming out, who are injured and wounded, specifically around global war and terrorism. They had a place to transition, and the soldiers would come there, and we were part of their health plan, and we monitor them to see, hey, how are they doing? If they're not going to be able to recover from this, we help them transition. What do you think you want to do when you get out? Oh, you want to go to this school? So we're doing things like helping them prepare for interviews, helping them, plan their next career. If they are taking medications, helping them with the medications to say, okay, listen, this is the medication you're taking. Are you sure you're going to be able to do A, B, C, and D? I mean, we were like caregivers, but on such a level. But I'm still a leader. So I'm an E7, and I'm in charge. I mean, one of the people I was in charge of was a full bird colonel, and I had to call him like, listen, hey sir, where you at today? Because you had to check on these folks, on this demographic, because they were actually doing things to themselves, and you had to make sure that this person was okay. I've been to several funerals from persons who were not able to make it through, and it wasn't because of something that someone else did. So this is a real world. These are real words. These are real people. So I watched how some of the things they went through, and it's like, okay, all right, if I'm helping these soldiers transition, I better find a plan for myself also. So then, I mean, that was actually, I think my leadership sent me there. I wouldn't say they didn't like me, but at the same time, there was no love there. But it did more good, and I was able to do more good than I thought I was going to be able to do.
You very much strike me as a person that makes lemonade out of lemons. Like, but if I'm going to be given this, I'm going to find the best way to do it. I'm going to do it the best way I can.
Hell yeah.
Maybe that's where Burning Dookie comes in. It's like, even if you're given that, even if you're given the duty
So
of
then,
burning the dookie.
okay, and I know, and I wanted, so then this is a burst lesson learned. And so then in Desert Storm, uh, you know, before there was Kellogg Brown and Root, before there was a lot of things, whenever you deploy somewhere, you have to create your own shelters, and you have to create your own latrines. So as part of that, you have folks that would build the structures, and they would have these 5-gallon cans that were cut in half, and they would be up under the the latrines, and people would have to pull them out once they got full, and then they have to burn the dookie. So then a good example of this is from the movie. Wow, what is that?
Jarhead?
Yep, Jarhead. And I remember the main character asked the colonel, he's like, "Hey, sir," he's like, "Can you give me a moment?" He's like, "Nope." And the colonel, the guy is actually from the show Navy SEALs. I forgot his name. Was it Navy SEALs or the unit? One of those. Anyway, so in order to make sure things go right, you have to pull those 5-gallon cans out, and it's a diesel MoGas mix. So then you pour 1 part diesel, 2 part MoGas, and MoGas is just like gasoline. And then you set it up, and you have to burn that dookie. This human waste full of everything, and you have to stir it, because you just can't. So you have to burn the dookie and stir it. And I remember when I was a private, and this is during Desert Storm, and this is like while we're deployed, and as long as you're not really burning dookie in life, life really isn't that bad, with the exception of getting shot at. There's getting shot at, but I mean, I remember as I'm burning this human waste, and the wind is blowing all of the diesel and all that into my clothes. My squad leader, who had put me on a detail, and he wasn't being mean. It was just like it had to get done.
Yeah.
Somebody got to burn it.
Right.
It's not going to burn itself. And
right.
He's the leader. He's not going to burn it. So interestingly enough, it kind of makes you contemplate, because at that time, let me see, I joined at 17. I was around 19 or 20 years old in my first war. And it kind of makes you reflect on life. It's like, man, people my age are out enjoying themselves, partying. When you're deployed, you just think about really weird things, like going to the store and getting a hot dog, or going,
yeah.
just going to the mall and getting a pair of shoes, because that's not happening. So as I burnt the dookie, and my squad leader, he looked at me. He was a Korean guy, and he had a really thick accent. He said, "Burse." It's like, "I feel sorry for you, Burse." It's like, "Yes, Sergeant. Yes, Sergeant." But hey, I did what I had to do. And that wasn't the first time, and nor was that that was the first time, but it wasn't the last time. But It just keeps things in perspective.
As you look back at that young Ahmad there burning the dookie, what advice would you give him?
I would say, do more. I would tell him to go for broke. That's what I would tell him. I would say, "Hey, listen," and in my opinion, I got a lot out of the military. I'm telling you, if I could tell you some of the stories about things, and I won't say. So then let's get this straight in the military. Like, whenever I wanted to learn how to jump out of planes and be a parachutist, that's something I wanted to do. However, the only reason I did it is because the military needed folks to jump out of planes. So it was a symbiotic, relationship, and those are the kind of things you got to keep in mind. Everything that I wanted to do, other people didn't want to do. Like when I wanted to be a drill sergeant, folks, no, you gotta work hours. You gotta do this. You actually have to work. Whereas folks were trying to, I think one of the big things I've seen about people is they're trying to skirt out of doing their job. You got to work anyway, so just go ahead and do it. So then I would tell him, go for broke, do more, push yourself further, embrace it all. Don't don't fear, you're not going to die. So
Mhm.
then that's what I tell the Buki, the Dookie burn in me. But I wouldn't. I mean, even with, because then this is the funny thing. When I enlisted in the military initially, I enlisted in two. They had 2-year contracts,
Mhm.
so it was 2 years, 26 months. So then, upon my return from Desert Storm, and remember, I joined in '89. Desert Storm was like in '91 and '92. It was shortly in my re-enlistment window, so I had the option of just leaving the military. But even with that, I was like, hey, I'm not done yet. Hey, there's other stuff I want to do. So then, I stayed. But I think, burning Dookie is a job. It's not, it's a job. It's not the job. It's
Mhm.
not, it's a part of it. So and I think that me being able to allow things to roll off. Now, in the midst of it, smelling all that, that's a different story. But after it's all said and done, and I can wash my hands and take a shower and wash my face. It's like, oh, this is cool. So,
So lead us into where you are now. You've talked about sort of the development of interpersonal skills, becoming an engineer coach, working with the Army Corps of Engineers. How has all of this come together into creating this sort of new passion in your life?
so then, when I left the military, I had the opportunity to take a job, which basically it was HR basically, with the United States Army Corps of Engineers. So, well, hold on, let me roll it back. So then I leave the military. I became a teacher, excuse me, an adjunct instructor at a local college, Millermont College. I was IT career development. And these things kind of always play into each other. So within career development, you're talking about how to help people with resumes, how to help people with goal setting, help people with, basic life skills to make them successful. And this is, as a matter of fact, it was just really interesting. I was there and it's like, hey, we need someone to teach this. It's like I looked at the curriculum. I was like, yeah, I'll teach it. It's like, okay. And that was the deal. It was like I got hired on as an IT instructor. Once again, the Army had paid me to learn information technology. It was one of the transition programs. So then I come on, I work in career development. Uh, After a little bit, almost 2 years, I decided I wanted to, try for a federal job. And I got hired on with the Army Corps of Engineers. Now, people are under the impression that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers are a component of the U.S. Army. They're a civilian component, but you don't have to enlist into service to become a member of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It's a federal job. I don't know how the structure got started, but the leadership is military officer led. However, all of the positions from the engineers, the district deputies, all of those folks, well, not the district deputies, but all those folks are civilian persons. So you don't have to be a member of the Army to become a member of the Army Corps of Engineers.
Mhm.
So then while I was there, uh, working in HR, I'm helping people develop interpersonal skills, supervisory skills. There's a lot that goes into, like, for instance, um, PMP and PMP certifications and practical engineer certifications. These are technical, very technical things. However, that the needed human relations portion, like supervisors, learning how to lead, things of that nature,
Mhm.
aren't really involved. So I began training because of my job. I was training and as interacting, and I realized there were some shortcomings that folks had, but there really weren't that many programs to kind of get them to that next level. Because you would have, I mean, I'm talking to very senior people. I'm saying very senior people who had no idea how to develop employees or were aware of programs. And I'm like, okay, all right, there's a niche here. Someone needs to tell folks how to do things, and there's they have their own sets of pressures, their own sets of time constraints.
Mhm.
Anxiety about their performance, and so I realized there's an opportunity here for me to, come in, help people that wanted help, who wanted, everyone needs a coach. It doesn't matter, either a coach or a mentor, but you need someone to tell you what your shortcomings are and kind of look at things from a different perspective to help you grow. So then that's kind of where I'm at right now as a career coach.
So, how can people I guess hire you or bring you on, bring you in to help with these sort of skill building sessions?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. Ahmad Burse. You can look me up and you can see me there. And you can also reach me at my email at Ahmad, AHMAD, at burseconsulting.com.
So when you built Burst Consulting,
Mhm.
was that sort of the how did it feel to finally get that like off the ground?
I'll tell you when I'm completed. But I would say I think it's official. It's official to me, but I think I've had opportunities to help and develop people. However, I've never helped and developed someone based off on me doing it for me. I want to bring value to people, but not bring value to people through an organization, but through my organization. As they say, if you're not living if you're not living your dream, then you're living someone else's dream. You literally are. And people may not get it, but you actually are. And although what they're asking from you is in alignment with what you want, if you have more to give or if there's more value that you'd like to bring, it's like I can help develop people when I was at the Corps of Engineers, but the way in which I can help develop them now, I can get a little bit more personal. I can dig down a little bit more because where I was at before, I was constrained by the position. It's like, hey, listen, you can talk to them about this, but you don't want to talk to them about that. So, or because of the position. But as a coach, you know, I'm looking at the full scope and saying, okay, all right, here, have you considered doing A, B, C, and D? And if not, let's start working on that. So.
Because you were sort of more of a go-getter in that transition into the civilian world, what type of advice would you have for any transitioning soldiers that are coming out that trying to find their way? I'm noticing a lot, especially in the last several episodes of the Scuttlebutt. We've been talking a lot about transitioning out of the military, ways that the programs that are there to help the men and women coming out to find work, figure out how to do interviews, get their resumes together, things like that, just sort of like basic building blocks of like, here's how you enter the workforce. But things like what you're talking about of like, I built a skill and I found a need, and now I'm going to build a business based off of what I can provide.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to me at a totally different level.
Well, so then let's take it back. I retired from the Army in 2012. But in the back of my mind, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted my own business. I wanted, not to be cliche, but I don't want to have to ask someone when I'm going on leave. You understand? I don't want to have to ask. I want to be able to set my schedule and say, okay, this is when I'm taking off. If I'm meeting a client and it's at 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, and I can meet that client at 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. I don't have to, this is my thought process here.
Yeah.
So then I think it's taken me some time to kind of to validate what direction I want to move in. But in regard to transitioning, I would highly recommend a lot of folks that transition are able to take, they have leave and they'll take leave for like, 90 days or something. I would highly recommend they take those 90 days and take leave and just do them. Because one of the things I realized about the military is those are the, if you're a square, right? Okay. And your personality is a square. However, the military is a circle. They're going to cut those rough corners off to make you fit inside of it. That's not a negative. That's not negative at all, because the Army tells you how to be successful. If you do A, B, C, and D, hey, that's fine. But for some folks, that might not be their natural personality. That might not be who they are. So if you've been this person that's not necessarily a bad person, but you've been doing this thing for so long, and the only time the true you, the authentic you, not that that's a negative, shows up is, whenever you're off barbecuing or whatever, you're doing something fun that allows you to be who you are. If the only time it shows up is limited, then you may not realize who you are. You've lost yourself. Because to be effective in the military, that's just like those skills. Some of those skills are there, but they're not natural. So whenever you leave the military, you need to figure out who you are. You need to figure out exactly who you are. What kind of, and it's not a bad thing. For me, I'm really silly, fun loving. That's who I am. However, in the military, especially as a drill sergeant, silly and fun loving ain't getting the job done. Silly and fun loving is not going to develop. It's not going to help people. They need someone who's going to be structured and there to help get them through these situations. So then I'd say anyone transitioning, do as much research, find out what you want to do, but take the time to just kind of decompress and let it out. Because anyone who spent any amount of time in the military has some kind of trauma. I'm not being funny. I'm just letting you know. The fact that you're sitting here talking to people who've been in the military, you have trauma. And I'm not being funny. It's vicarious trauma. It's because, hey, listen, that Dookie story I told you, 2 or 3 years or 2 or 3 months down the road, you're going to see something, or you're going to be like, hey, listen, that made me think about the Dookie story. Something, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's going to stick in your mind. So people say things that have occurred in their lives. So anybody who's been in the military is going to have trauma. And for you to say, oh, no, I don't. But the thing about the military is you don't really face, or I didn't face my trauma, any of it, because I was gone. I was deploying. I was a drill sergeant. I was helping this. I was burning Dookie. I was doing all these other things that didn't make me face them. So when I transitioned out of the military, I took some time, and that trauma comes back to visit you. From the beginning, it's like, hey, you remember me? I bet you didn't think about me. Well, now that you're home alone and you're eating sandwiches and scratching, watching TV, hey, I'm here to visit you. So then I would say, take that time, transition, and as your transition, pick something that you like and then become it if that's what you really like. I like 007. I'm not going to be no spy, but I like the way he dresses and I like the way he carries himself, the character. Hey, you can do that. There's nothing to say you can't. If you want to be a chef, watch the chef shows. What did that chef do to get to where they're at? What schools have they gone to? What experiences they have? Read a biography. Those things. Find out exactly what piques your interest. Begin pursuing it, but take that time to decompress. Because if you don't, it's going to come back to you crazy.
Oh, Matt, I can't think of a better way to sort of wrap up the conversation here. I feel like I owe you for your hour. I feel like I've been consulted. I've been coached. I feel great. This has been an awesome conversation, and I hope that our audience feels the same way. And if they're looking for someone for a consultant, I hope that we can connect you with them.
Absolutely. Or it's funny as and if you're a veteran and you're wondering where you're at, just not even an engineer, just if it's just you need them conversations, because I think for most vets they just I miss soldiers. I miss the vibe. People don't understand the thing that keeps a lot of militaries young are its soldiers coming in. So they come in, they understand technology, they understand different things. I was watching a TikTok. And the soldier was making this noise. And the two soldiers were communicating like that, like silly, stupid. And then the NCO comes and say, hey, both y'all shut the F up. Y'all stop that. So then it was, but that's what they do. That kind of reminds me of another story, and I don't want to eat up your time, but so my partner's team, he's a platoon sergeant and he has a squad leader, and the squad leader loves Star Trek. So you communicate on the radio a lot. So then the squad leader, and this is this is like 20 years ago. So the squad leader loves Star Trek. He likes Klingons. So he teaches his squad how to speak Klingon. So they're speaking Klingon over the net, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of, there's nothing wrong with that, but the platoon sergeant comes down to their freak, like, hey, so hey, whatever their name is, X-ray 1, come see me. Stop effing Klingon on the net. But it's like stuff like that
Yeah.
it keeps you alive. I mean, you come down and you're listening to Borket, and it's like what so it's just the military. It's little craziness like that. So
Oh man. Yeah, I feel like we barely scratched the surface on all the stories that you probably have, Ahmad. Just great stuff. Seriously, and I want to thank you for your time, for your stories, for your honesty. Just hearing this today, it's been very uplifting and inspirational. Just a really great conversation. I hope that our audience can reach out to you. We'll put your contact information here in the description if you're looking for consultant, if you're in the Army Corps of Engineers, if you're looking for somebody to talk to. Ahmad's here. Ahmad, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
Hold on one second. You can that email Burse, or excuse me, Ahmad at burseconsulting.com.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and my phone number for that business is 301-659-7899, and that's
anybody nationwide can connect with you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Or you can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm the only Ahmad Burse on LinkedIn, and there'll be a picture of me, and I'm like, it's me.
Well, Ahmad, I wish you nothing but the best of luck in the consulting business. It's been a pleasure and an honor. To our audience, please like, share, subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube so you're the first to know whenever we release new episodes. And if you'd like to reach out to me with any thoughts about this episode or ideas about future upcoming episodes, you can do so at Shaun, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. Ahmad, thank you again for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Scuttlebutt. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. Tobacco-Free Adagio Health has been supporting the podcast for quite some time now. We've been so pleased to be supported by them. They are dedicated to reducing and preventing tobacco use and getting the word out about the hazards of smoking and secondhand smoke. They're all about health, so they want people to quit. They have classes, nicotine replacement therapy, and a popular quit line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. They also educate people, children especially, about tobacco use from cigarettes, cigars, pipes, chew, snuff, and other nicotine products like vaping. And finally, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health advocates for public and private policies that ensure healthy places to live, work, and play. You can learn all about what Tobacco-Free Adagio Health offers at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. Or you can check out the 2 Scuttlebutt episodes that featured Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. We had a wonderful representative come on to the podcast, talk to us about all the classes and therapies that they offer. It was 2 wonderful conversations, so I definitely direct you to both of those if you want more information, or just call their free quit line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. Thank you again, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health, for your support.